We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us, talking about domestic violence shelters and some of the things being put in place right now to help mainly women who are finding themselves in these difficult situations. The YWCA, of course, is very, very at the forefront of all that. And, Sharon Roberson's with us. She's the president and CEO of the YWCA here. And look, part of this, too, is recognizing it when it's happening, you know, and we talked about how people make calls when they do see something that concerns them. That could also extend beyond folks that know the individual. It could be someone styling their hair.
Yes.
But talk about that.
Yes, we have a wonderful community of cosmetologists that brought to our attention that oftentimes when they are working on an individual or styling their hair, the person will talk to them. There's a special relationship between you and your cosmetologist or hairstylist. And that brought about this issue of trying to understand how we could better equip cosmetologists and barbers to be able to support their customers. And this isn't them intervening, this isn't them, being any sort of, they have to report anything. This is really to equip them while they receive the information on being that better friend, that better support system, having them understand what are the clues that there may be some sort of, especially physical domestic violence, but also having the resources to say, if this is going on, you might want to call the YW's, line. You might want to get more information. I would hate to see this happen to you. So this is really a law that will be effective January of 2022. It was passed already. It's just that it takes a while for the implementation. The YW will provide training. It will be free of charge to all newly licensed and unlicensed cosmetologists and barbers in the state.
And when you say it's a law, meaning that is it requiring it?
It will be required. It
required as part of their training.
Yes.
If you're going to become a cosmetologist or a barber, part of your training, along with everything else, would be learning how to deal with these situations.
Correct. Wow. We work very closely with the Department of Commerce and Insurance, and they've been wonderful in really understanding that this is really not a burden for them, but it actually enhances the professions.
You know what I thought you were going to say is that part of what you're going to train them, and maybe this is part of it, isn't so much the talking and the confiding, but that if you're going to a cosmetologist, maybe they're working on and they see injuries or things that you had covered with makeup that maybe you were hiding, and they see these and go, now, how do I address, how did you get that big lump on the back of your head or something like that? Would that be part of the equation?
Yes, it will help them have an understanding of it.
I'm sure some of them see some of the injuries, right?
Definitely, most definitely. In fact, those are the cases that brought about this law change, because people would actually see hair missing that's been pulled out, bruises under the scalp, cuts and abrasions, and that really is what forced us to really start looking very critically at this part of domestic violence work.
It's interesting. These two are building blocks in the big picture. Okay, we just talked about how you can get out of a lease in a certain situation, and now this, just another building block of a group of folks that might notice things and passing that. Are there other things that can be, what are some other future building blocks you might look at off the top of your head? I was trying to think of others besides barbers and hairstylists that might be in a position, where you confide and talk, and I don't know, I mean, you think about like a bartender or someone like that, or someone at a restaurant. Maybe not.
We have actually looked at some of those other professions.
Getting your nails done.
Yes.
How about that? Manicures. Now, manicure, I would think, would be a good one, too.
Yes, we've actually looked at some of those other professions because this is easily translatable to other professions that come in close contact with individuals that may be victims of domestic violence. We've actually looked at those things.
So who knows, maybe down the road you add that to the picture.
And one thing we're very proud of at the YW, in both of these pieces of new legislation, we've had bipartisan support. So what we do know is that our legislators really do understand, appreciate the need to protect victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking.
Yeah. There's various bars, and I know one woman who is a owner of an establishment that now is putting in place safety measures for their female patrons. Now, this may not necessarily be among relationships, where if a woman gets up to go to the bathroom and leaves her drink there, the bartenders have been trained to watch the drink to make sure no scumbag comes and puts a pill in there to date rape or something like that, date rape drug, or to pick up cues from a woman who is very uncomfortable with someone that maybe is approaching her and not leaving her alone, and how they can intervene. And there's more bars downtown are recognizing the need for that. What do you think?
I mean, that really makes a lot of sense. And really, if you we are in the domestic violence space.
Right.
But there is sexual assault and there's stalking, but there's also human trafficking. And that's another thing that people really have to be aware of. And we've had women that have been trafficked in our Weaver Center. So there's a lot of overlap on many of these different areas. And I will say this is very important for everyone to be aware, aware of your surroundings. If you see something that doesn't seem quite right and you want some understanding, there are many nonprofits in our area that can really help you better understand. For instance, you see some young girl that doesn't look quite right. Get the information you need, because we have to depend on the citizens of our community to make this city better.
Yeah, you got to get the sense if you're paying attention, if something's not quite there. And my take is, make the call on it, I guess. And if it turns out to be nothing, at least you played it safe. But when you say make the call, would that be to the YW, or would that be to, I guess, the police? I've had the TBI talking about human trafficking. If you observe someone in an establishment or at a hotel that really seems out of sorts, a young woman or something like that, I guess you can make the call to local law enforcement.
Yes, you can. If no other number, you can actually call the YW number, and we'll get you to the resource you need to get to. Even if it's not our call, we make sure that because all these organizations work together. And we do have a wonderful family safety center, which is a good hub for the various agencies that work together in these areas.
Do you ever have any of these offenders try to find the woman at the shelter?
Oh, yes.
So I know it's very secure, and when we've occasionally done stories, of course, we never reveal where that location is, but they can find out sometimes.
Yes.
So it's secured, but they show up. They're not getting in.
Yes, very much so. In fact, the future of shelters is really technology as opposed to fencing. We do have some significant fencing.
Are we talking about a laser that might come out and cut their head off? No, nothing. Well, you said technology. Okay, no. What's the technology?
Well, the technology is really to have it so that you have enough cameras and enough,
see them coming,
so you can see people coming. Because with cell phones, and even though we do really work very heavily with anyone coming into shelter, so we know that their cell phones are not being, traced and things of that nature, it's getting more and more difficult, because abusers know technology and they find individuals. And we have various alerts that we live under of red, yellow, and green, when individuals are known to know where the person is. And if it's an extraordinarily dangerous situation, we actually move from various shelters, move from our shelter to another shelter, which we have relationships with in order to keep someone safe.
Wow. Do you have a pretty good understanding of the psychology behind these abusers that would go to the length to continue and show up at a place? Would they consider the victim their property, that their control? What is it? I mean, I'm just trying to think. I understand jealousy can get out of control, but to that length, where they're basically throwing their lives away because it's not going to end well for them, period. Okay? So what is the psychology behind it?
Well, at the heart of domestic violence is power and control. Is power and control over another individual. And there's actually a circle, and we will show individuals when they come into Weaver, this is the power and control wheel. And they are amazed because they did not understand how they were being manipulated by this other person. For instance, you have this wonderful relationship, they're kind, they're sweet, they're doing everything for you. And then slowly you see little parts of their personality, and then slowly it gets to this point. Then you always are seeking that better situation that you started off with, but the abuse continues and it's cyclical, and it's for whatever reason, and I can't start to understand it, but this individual wants to have power and control over this other individual.
And it can be, as you said, both mental and physical. Physical is fairly obvious.
Yes.
The mental would be just degrading, bullying, just
controlling
words.
What you wear, what you do, how you look. And I've had women to say, I tried to never dress up because if I dressed up, they assumed I was going to do something with someone else. And financial is a huge part of domestic violence because women who even make the money don't control even to write a check or to spend X amount of money or having to show receipts for everything at the grocery store. And some people don't really understand it until you spell it out to them, and they understand I've been manipulated, and it's very difficult.
It's just hard for me to get a handle on. I mean,
Well.
it is. I totally understand that it comes about, but just that they don't recognize that what they're doing, I don't know if it's insecurities, maybe they were brought up in a situation where they saw, you know, some of it can be cultural.
Yes. And we do know that if a person grows up in a domestic violence household, they are much more likely to either be an abuser or a victim.
That's what they witness. That's kind of what they know.
That's what they know. And so love becomes this violent act, or love becomes, you know, this controlling nature.
All right, we'll take a break on that note. When we come back, we've got one more segment or two that we're going to talk about pets. I want to touch on that as well, which is another part that I've never thought of. You know, we've talked about domestic violence, certainly with you on this show and others many times. We're hitting on some things I never thought about. I mean, the leases, the hairdressers, and now pets. What about that? We'll be back right after this.